That's great. You've always got another little toy, haven't you?
But tech that facilitates. If someone's got a story to tell, like today, Lloyd. Today's
I do have a story to tell. I've been telling the story over and over again today.
Do tell your story.
So Theresa May announced a general election.
She did indeed.
And I thought, at that point, I suddenly thought this is a time to do something that I've been meaning to do for a long time, which is to get out into the country, to go around all over the UK and run open meetings for people to talk about politics in a way that we used to talk about politics, and we seem to have stopped talking about politics because we now do it all online. And so all of the conversations I see on my Facebook are of the form, so-and-so is an idiot, I'd never vote for them, or so-and-so is evil. And then somebody says, oh no they're not. And somebody says, oh yes they are, and here's a Huffington Post article to prove my point. And somebody says, oh well, here's an article I found in the Times that proves the opposite. And I don't feel like we're getting anywhere with those conversations. So I want to have some real face-to-face conversations about what politics is about, what power is in our society, how we want things to be different, how we want to run this country, as well as who we want to run it for us. So I'm an unconference kind of guy. Open space is my favourite way of facilitating things, and I really only do things now where the audience gets to decide what the agenda is. I can't do, I'm not interested in things where we clever metropolitan elite people like me sit in London and go, I know what would be great to talk about, and then I make people talk about that over and over again. Yeah. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm much more interested in finding out what people are interested in talking about themselves and giving them a space to do that. And that's what that open space format is all about.
How do we co-create experiences rather than just having the passive viewer and responder kind of thing?
Which perversely is the sort of thing that became more popular because we used online tools. When we started having blogs and podcasts, we got some power back about making media ourselves, and I think out of that we found that we could make media together, and realised that conversations don't need to be hosted by somebody else. They don't need media doesn't need to be owned by somebody else.
I think the younger generation as well are much more comfortable with the notion of collaboration and co-creation. They're always being asked for their opinion, and it's, and they're much more comfortable with giving it now. Sure.
So the plan is to, between now and the 7th of June, which is the day before the election, to go to as many cities and towns in the UK as possible. There aren't that many days, so it can't be that many. But to go to as many as possible and to get largest groups of people, I'm aiming for 100 people in each city, get them together to talk for the best part of a day about power and politics.
So what's the mechanism in which people can take part in this?
Well, I wrote a blog post on my blog, perfectpath.co.uk. That lays out what I've got so far, which is basically what's come out of my head so far.
Yeah.
There's a link on there to a Lumio group, and people can get involved in that. And I'm going to go and set up a blog to hold all that information. There'll be ways of getting involved in helping find venues, manage the days themselves, make decisions about how all things are, and importantly, a GoFundMe page to accept donations.
Just give a little bit of an overview of what the unconference concept is and open space.
So the concept is that it's a meeting where the participants define the agenda themselves, and they choose to talk about and work on things that are important to them. So each space has a question that is the foundation of the day. And the question I've come up with is, having said all of that, what are we going to do about this place that we find ourselves in? And what that means is, having said all that, having said all the stuff we've said on Facebook and had arguments about, let's put that aside. What are we actually going to do about this place, this position we found ourselves in, which is somewhat disempowered, somewhat disconnected from politics? In my view, this is where I see it. Somewhat disempowered and disconnected. What are the things that we want to do together, maybe in the next year, in this place, especially in Nottingham or Derby or Manchester or Aberdeen or Plymouth or Belfast? What are we going to do together to make things better? And so people can talk about anything they want to within that format, and we run a little exercise at the beginning to just set up the agenda.
Everybody starts in the same location. The concept is introduced, the topic is introduced, and then each person in the audience has the opportunity to come forward, suggest a question that they would like to talk about. And then that gets written on a post-it note and handed to one of the invigilators. And we do that for 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
However long it takes to fill the wall with ideas.
And then we end up with a board that has time slots, topics, and then people come and look at the board. They can spot which topic they want to talk about. They can notice which area of the building it's going to take place in, and they go to that. Now,
and they organise it themselves.
The other thing about unconference and open space is this rule of 2 feet. So just tell me a little bit about rule of 2 feet.
So there are some guidelines for how we do all of this, but there's only one rule in it, which is that if you've gone to a session and you find that you're either not learning anything or not contributing anything to the conversation, then you really should move on to somewhere else. You're obliged to. That's why it's the law. To move on somewhere else where you can be useful, or either you can contribute something or you can be learning something.
There's a danger, I think, and you might be able to give some tips on this as well. There is a danger that you don't stay anywhere long enough, and by the time you get to the end of the day, you realise that you haven't really spent enough time anywhere. So when you've attended open spaces and conferences, what has your technique to participation been?
Well, first of all, there are a couple of dynamics that the open space community recognise as ways that people behave when they've got that rule of 2 feet in place, which is, and we talk about them as bumblebees or butterflies. So bumblebees is not people, but an activity that is zipping from group to group, carrying pollen information between the groups, and making connections between those groups effectively. That's one thing that happens. Another thing that happens is you see people as butterflies.
But there is that sense, I think, if you're a butterfly, and I've been in both positions, if you're a butterfly, you enter the room and people are sat in a circle and they're talking, and you kind of listen in, you walk around, you get a different perspective. It's quite a good social media perspective to be if you're wanting to take Instagram photos.
And it's a very important contribution to the kind of presence of the room. For me, I try to balance. It never works out the way I want it to, but I try to balance the time where I'm holding sessions myself, when I'm being a supportive member of somebody else's session all the way through, and the others when I am either bumblebeeing or butterflying. I try to spread that out between over the whole day, Because that for me is what.
I've also noticed
other people do what.
Yeah,
they do.
when I've attended open spaces at the same time as you, I've noticed that on occasions, if there's a session or there's a period of time where you've chosen not to attend, you will actually take yourself off and just have a sit down and watch people walking past you.
Do that, yeah.
You know, I think that's a really
part of butterflying for me. Yeah.
really valuable thing to do, is to not feel that you have to be somewhere all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last thing I want to ask you about is the report back and the actual taking a session.
So if you suggest a session, then I suggest that it's your responsibility to write some form of report of what that session is. Now that report might be a few bullet points, it might be a photograph, it might be a great long essay about all the things that happened. These sessions don't have to be a presentation, they can be a question that's asked, it can be sharing of people. So there's all sorts of different forms that these sessions can take. But it's great if people can make some sort of report, and
we have a corner for that.
We have a corner for that. We call it the newsroom, and it's a corner where people can go and sit and write up their reports or create their reports, whatever, and a website to which people can send those reports while they're in the room, so that other people can see them online. And at the end of the day, sometimes I don't know whether we'll do this or not, but at the end of the day we create a printout and put it up on the wall, and people can walk around and read those reports too.
So on this instance, there's an event potentially 4th of June and 7th of June.
At least.
Your blog post, if people want to go and find your original blog post, perfectpath.co.uk. And
I
anything
can
else,
give you the
we'll
link.
put information in the notes.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Thank you.
This is the point where I go back to the camera and
And it's gone
find
off.
that
The
it didn't
battery ran
record.
out or something. Yeah.